Joshua chapter 5, there are 15 verses in this chapter, which makes it a short chapter, but the stuff that you talk about are pretty heavy. I've got three sections that we're going to go through again, but in our last study we learned that the nation of Israel has just crossed the Jordan River. The Ark of the Lord has crossed as well, which means as soon as those priests that were carrying the Ark on their shoulders came out of the riverbed, that last step that came out and it planted on dry land outside of the river, the water started rushing through again and the Jordan returned back to normal. So, memory stones have been placed, the camp at Gilgal has been put in place as well, and now we are at Joshua chapter 5. So we're going to look at three key sections. The first one is section 1, radical obedience. That is verses 1 through 9. So it says this: "And it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel, until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was their spirit in them any more, because of the children of Israel. And at that time the Lord said unto Joshua, Make these sharp knives and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time. And Joshua made him sharp knives," terrible, and circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise all the people that came out of Egypt that were males. Even all the men of war died in the wilderness by the way, after they came out of Egypt. Now all the people that came out were circumcised, but all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way, as they came forth out of Egypt, them had not circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the people that were men of war, which came out of Egypt, were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, and to whom the Lord sware that he would not show them the land, which the Lord sware unto their fathers that he would give us, a land that floweth with milk and honey." Verse 7, "And their children whom he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not circumcised them by the way. And it came to pass, when they had done circumcising all the people, that they abode in their places in the camp till they were whole," or rested. And verse 9 here, "And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you, wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day." Okay. Tough first section. Okay, it really is. But this is about radical obedience. There has been a lot of obedience so far for the Israelites to follow God through the wilderness, for the Israelites to trust God for the food, for the manna, for the water from a rock, for the pillar of smoke, for the pillar of fire, for water to be parted, for safe travels, for deliverance. There's been a lot of trust. And now we get to the obedience part. Because trust and obedience are two different things. I can trust that my dog is going to protect my family, but does my dog have great obedience? Not all the time. Not all the time. Do I trust he's going to do a good job? Yeah, but is he going to listen to when he's overexcited and I'm saying, sit? Not all the time. Not all the time. So, the thing about this is there's been a lot of trust. And now they have to obey the law of God, the word of God as well. It's not just putting faith out there, now it's actually following and doing. So that's the big difference. But it says this, that it came to pass when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of the Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan. So, the big miracle, the river Jordan got dried up so that the nation of Israel could cross through. People heard. People heard about this miracle. This wasn't just something that just coasted on by that no one even noticed. This was a big deal. People noticed it. The kings of these places noticed it. They heard of the incredible miracle that God had done. They heard of the mighty Jordan River drying up. They heard of the nation of Israel crossing over. They're hearing of all these things that they know are signs after signs after signs of promise that they're going to lose their land real soon. They heard about this stuff. And what did they do? Their hearts melted. Some Bibles say that their hearts were overcome with fear. Others say that they just melted away, that they didn't have strength anymore because they knew what was coming. The Amorites and the Canaanites, these are specifically two of the closest populations, but also perhaps the largest in the area. It's the reason why they're talked about, because they're the big kingdoms. So word had spread of God's work, of God's mighty hand, and how he had guided these Israelites through and through. So they've gone out the river, they come to the other side, they've encamped at Gilgal, which is their encampment place. And the first thing that Joshua does in verse 2, entering the land of Canaan, putting up the memory stones, looking at what God's done, remembering what God's done, is to make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel. Now, a reason for this is in verse 4, it says this, but the reason why is because all the dads, they came out of Egypt. They were rescued out of Egypt, but they disobeyed. But they were already believers, so they had already gone through the circumcision ritual, or whatever you want, ceremony, whatever you want to call it. And it had been done, and it had been done correctly. And then these others that were born in the wilderness, they hadn't been able to follow that same ritual. They hadn't been able to follow that same ceremony. So actually, to follow along with God's law, which was back then in the Old Testament, was intact, right? It was something that you had to do to show that you were a follower of God. It was a sacrifice to God, was to get circumcised. So, the sons who were born in the wilderness, first thing, that sucks. You get born in the wilderness, you just got to keep on marching. Imagine a pregnant lady walking through the wilderness, carrying all that weight, and then popping out a baby. That's craziness. So, the thing about all of this was that they had to happen once the men, the dads, who had disobeyed God, once they had gone away, that's when they'd get into the promised land. Because that's what God said would happen. God keeps his word. God does not lie. God does not go against what he said. He holds firm for what he said. The promises he makes, he fulfills. And this is one of them. Hey, you disobeyed me, you will not see the promised land. So this whole nation's marching through and waiting for a whole generation to die. 40 years. 40 years, that's a long time. So, flint knives and get circumcising. That was the command. You've made it out of the river, get it done. Flint or obsidian, different type of stone as well. These would have been a common type of knife for these rituals. Exodus 20:25 tells us that the Israelites were prohibited from using metal blades in the construction of altars and rituals and ceremonies and things like that. So that's why they used stone instead. Man, that's tough. There are a lot of rules and a lot of things to go through here. Genesis 17:10 reminds us, it reminds us that circumcision was part of the covenant between man and God. It was something that was entwined them, basically brought them together. It was a promise and it was a fulfillment situation. It was a covenant between God and man. You do this, you are one of my people. That was it. So we find out that actually this is a big sacrifice for guys, a huge sacrifice. And I think the thing about this is nowadays we look at it and people say it's a health thing and whatever. But when you go back to the history-wise, it's because God wanted to know who his people were. He wanted to know who these people were. He wanted to be able to say that you are one of my people. That's the way it was. So it says this, once they are circumcised, once all the men of the war died in the wilderness, by the way, after they came out of Egypt, when all the new people were circumcised, who were born in the wilderness, that's when they got into the promised land. That idea, when that generation was gone, the promised land was theirs, they walk into it, but now they have to do the thing that they were told to do. Then we look at verse 6, and it says, basically for 40 years the Israelites in the wilderness, until all the nation of warriors that left Egypt perished. They had to wander until they all perished. And why? Because they didn't listen. Because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, unto whom the Lord swore he would not show them the land, which the Lord swore on to their fathers that he would give us, a land that floweth with milk and honey. This great promise. Hey, if you just listen to my voice, hey, if you just listen, you cried out, I heard your groaning, I heard your shouting, I heard your cries of, I don't want to be enslaved anymore. I need help. God, help us. Bring us out of here. Deliver us. And I did. And then you chose not to trust me. And then you chose to not obey. And because you chose not to obey, because you chose not to trust, you're not going to see the thing that I promised you. What a sad way for some of these guys to finish this scripture of this passage, that they would never see the promised land, but they would be known as people who did not obey the voice of the Lord. That's a sad thing. I would not want to be one of those people. That would not be something I would want next to my name in the Bible. Hey, Jamie did not obey the voice of the Lord. That's brutal. What does that say about your relationship with God? But they didn't listen to the voice of Yahweh, and God swore that they would not see the land that he swore to their ancestors, that land flowing with milk and honey. That land is Canaan. That's where it's beginning right here. From Gilgal inwards, it's going to be their land. In verse 7, it says, and their children whom he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised. So Joshua was basically calling this new generation of the nation of Israel to be circumcised, to be followers of God. Because remember, Old Testament law. Thankful for Jesus, thankful for all these things to not have to happen anymore. But back then, that was the identification. You a follower of God? Well, this is the things you had to do. And this is it. Joshua is then basically saying, this new generation is going to be a generation after God. A generation following God. A generation for him. That's a great identity to have. It's a great identity. In verse 8, it came to pass when they had done circumcising all the people that they abode in their places in the camp till they were whole. When the ceremony was finished, when all of it was done, they then spent time to rest and recover. I'm thankful that God sees that sometimes it's good just to rest, and he gives us time to do that. Right? He gave them Gilgal, this safe place that they could encamp. They could sleep in there, they could put up their tents, they could be there and be able to take this time to rest. God gives us that when we need it the most. I think this is when they needed it the most. So, and verse 9, there's this one phrase here, and the Lord said unto Joshua, this day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. How's it going?
How do they not get infections?
Ooh, what do you reckon?
I don't know.
Magic.
I obsidian.
What do you think?
They were some of the only people who washed their hands back then.
Oh, yeah. Jewish rituals. Think about all the cleansing rituals, all the stuff at the temple, how long they would wash their hands for.
That doesn't eliminate infection though.
I mean, it does a lot better than not. So, I'm just saying. I would say they're probably one of the most cleanest people around, based on rituals that were put in place in the temple that they would have carried on following. It's a good answer. Is that a good enough answer for you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Got a question?
I was wondering, why did the Jews only do it?
Because they were God's people, right? The nation of Israel. And anyone else got a different answer for that? Scott, Wes, anything you want to say?
No, that's it. And they were God gave them the word. They're the only ones who knew.
Yeah. So, specifically saying these are my people, and that's why they will do it. So I know who they are, and they know who they are as well. Give it a press.
So after Jesus died, did people start copying the Jews?
Start copying them?
Yeah, by that.
I mean, people still do it to this day. You know? But then it's scripturally not necessary anymore to show that you're a follower of God to do that. So that's why this is such a funny conversation to have, right? Because it's one of those things of God sent Jesus down. Jesus brought in the new covenant, the new law, so that a lot of this stuff doesn't actually take effect anymore. It's good some stuff is really good to cling to. So some stuff is really good, like 10 Commandments. Don't think that you don't have to obey those anymore. But there's some other stuff in here, like bacon. Oh, thankful that we can eat bacon, right? But there's a lot of that new law that comes in. Adam, what are you going to say?
Yeah, God not only gave them the covenant not to eat pork and to wash them hands, and not only was that for him, but it was also good for them because pork not cooked properly gave you worms.
Oh yeah.
In the 1920s, that's actually when doctors discovered to wash their hands because they were digging in cadavers and then going and reviving people, which would cause disease, and that's around the time they discovered that washing
passing all that stuff on. Awesome.
Yeah.
But that's a really great point. God's rules and God's law, even in the Old Testament, it's still good for you. Right? It's still a good thing to look at, and it is there put in place for a reason. The whole Bible is there for a reason. You've got to understand that. And even when we look at it and you go, wow, that's crazy. Why did they do that? God had a reason. And even if it was to stop infection or to teach, doctors 1900 years later about how to be safe in the surgery rooms, whatever it is, or if it even just was to set them apart from the rest of the world. There is a reason why. And I think that's the whole point. God's doing this, God's saying to them, be set apart, be different. Everyone okay? Everyone good? Good questions, love it, this is awesome. Okay, so, what was I going to say? Verse 9, the Lord said unto Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off of you. What does that mean? Any of you guys got that idea? The reproach of Egypt from off you. Any ideas? The reproach of Egypt. Kind of weird words, right? Go for it, Adam.
Repercussions?
Repercussions? Of what?
Of being slaves to Israel, Egypt.
What verse, sorry?
Verse 9. Yeah, think about that for a second, because it's a weird kind of thing to say, but the thing that I got off of this was like almost the disgrace of Egypt. The idea of like the bad stuff of Egypt, like it's been wiped away now. Because there's this thing here, and this is a historical thing as well. Egyptians actually practice a different form of circumcision. Okay? Jews had a different way, Egyptians had a different way. And what this is kind of saying is, when Joshua did this, notice that it said a second time. So for some of these guys, it was a second circumcision because the first one wasn't the whole thing. And that's what makes this really tough. Because it's like, man, there's a lot of laws and a lot of rules here that makes it kind of awkward to be a guy in the Bible back in these times. Okay? But a different method to the way that Israel prescribed or handled these things. And I think that's the key part here. He's saying, hey, it didn't get done the way that God asked you to get it done back in Egypt. Maybe it needs to be done the right way. Or maybe it's because of the repercussions of being a slave in Egypt. Or maybe it's because of the separation from God and the slavery time. Who knows? The reproach of Egypt, though. It's a tough line. Anyone else got any other thoughts about that? The reproach of Egypt? Any ideas? Anything? No?
Do you want me to read that? Because I have a new translated version, verse 9.
Instead of the King James?
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
The King Jimothy version? Come on. What does yours say?
Okay.
Verse 9.
Then the Lord said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the shame of your slavery in Egypt.
Yeah.
So that place has been called Gilgal
Gilgal,
to this day.
Yeah. The shame of your disgrace in
Yes.
Egypt. That's all part of it, right? He's trying to get rid of this identity that came across them. And that went deep. That went deep. Are you convinced that you're a slave? Well, God's given you a new identity. Stop acting like that. Stop acting in those ways. You can read all the way through Exodus and some of the other books how they resorted back to their old ways. It was better back when. It was better. It's not. It's not. It's better with God. Okay, so that was the first section. Second section here, celebrating the Passover, new provision, verses 10 till 12. Again, this is only 15 verses long. It's not too much of a deep dive here, but 10 to 12, it says this, and the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self-same day. Verse 12, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. Okay, so we've got the Israelites now camped at Gilgal. Got a nice little place set up. Beautiful view of the river this side. It's fantastic. You know, nice place. Their home base, Gilgal, whilst waiting to conquer the promised land, whilst waiting to take over, to take ownership of this land. And after they rested on that 14th day of the month at twilight, they celebrated the Passover. They had a good old celebration. And we can read in Exodus 12:48 that any stranger who is with you who wants to celebrate the Passover must be circumcised. Then they will not be regarded as a stranger anymore. Okay? So you're having like a Passover meal, a random guy walks in and you're like, hey, you a follower of God or not? Well, to partake in this meal, you have to be circumcised. Give me 2 seconds. So that they could actually be regarded as a native of God, like a native of the land, instead of a stranger or a sojourner of the land instead. What's your question?
Weird question, but how do they know the dude's not lying? They don't check, right?
I don't know.
Like, take off
That is a weird question, yeah. But I think it's more like,
I mean,
you know.
couldn't you just say you are and just go?
Well, then what would happen to you if you eat of the Passover meal and you're not?
You get struck down.
You struck by lightning.
So
There's some judgment that comes with that. There's some rules about that. Check out Exodus. I'm just saying, like, it's the same with like you invite having communion, knowing that you've got hardened heart. You invite the judgment of God there with you because of what you're allowing. What you're saying is, I'm good. I'm ready to have your food, your meal, your provision, but I'm actually not ready. I've got anger and aggression in my heart. I'm not good. What's that?
I think they'll fear God more than the pain, right?
Yeah. Well, they've seen God.
Yeah.
Think about it. The big pillar of smoke, the pillar of fire, the provision that He's provided. He has control over the water parting, the Jordan drying up. Like, God's just shown them control. If you've seen it every single day, and you know that person, that God is in charge, it doesn't matter what the pain is. You know what He's done for you. You know the blessings instead. Yeah, it's really awkward, but you see how mighty God is, right? That's the whole point. So, now the original Passover, obviously the original Passover, it could not be repeated, right? It wasn't going to be repeated, but there was power in remembrance. We talked about this last week with the memory stones. The original Passover, what was it for? Go for it.
It was the angel of death passing over Israel.
And what stopped them from being destroyed?
The blood of the lamb on
Blood of the lamb on the door frame, right?
Yeah.
With the hyssop. And the whole point of this is we won't be able to, you can't replicate that. The angel of death has already been sent down to do that stuff to get them freed from Egypt. And now they're saying, no, we need to remember what happened back then. And we'll remember by having a meal, by having a celebration, by remembering what God has done to get us to this point. Memory stones, again, key part of this because it's about the remembrance of what happened. The stones are there to help them remember, not to worship the stones, right? Go for it.
We had the question last a few weeks ago. You guys asked if the stones are still there.
Yeah.
They are and are visible. And you can go get pictures of them. Nancy and Phil.
That's right.
Right up on the hill, look down. They're right there in the center of the river.
There you go. At Gilgal.
Yeah, it's all nice.
So there you go. I even that, you think that just kind of cements the truth that is the Bible. The Bible tells you that they're there. The stones are there. Like, that's a really incredible thing. I would love to see a photo of that. Actually, it'd be fantastic. So, in Exodus 12, 1 through 28, you can read about the original Passover. Okay, you don't have to go and read that right now because that's a big chunk. But basically, it was God's deliverance of Israel from slavery in Egypt to where they are now. In Numbers 9, 1 to 5, we can read that the Israelites celebrated the Passover at least once in the wilderness, at least once in 40 years. But now they're in the promised land. Now they've made it. The old generation's dead. The new generation has come. Everyone's prepared. Everyone's ready. Everyone is a follower of God. And now they're going to do their first thing of celebration, Passover. Remember what happened before. So after the Passover, in remembrance of what God has done, in the same way we are to be in constant remembrance in our redemption at Calvary and live our lives in what was accomplished at the cross. Remembering what Jesus did at the cross, not worshipping the cross. I keep saying this, but it's really important because it's one of those things you can get hung up on, and people go, well, why do all the churches in everywhere got a cross on top of it? Well, it's to help you be reminded of what Jesus did. Not the cross's power, not the cross as a spiritual thing. The cross was a horrible torture device. A horrible torture device, which helped Jesus accomplish his mission. Romans didn't realize they were actually helping Jesus get to the finish line here by hoisting him up high and leaving him there to die. Right? So, we remember what happened at the cross. We don't worship the cross. We remember Jesus on the cross. We worship Jesus. That's the difference here. Verse 12, Exodus 16, 31 to 35 tells us about how God provided bread from heaven, manna from heaven to the Israelites during their time in the wilderness. Okay, God provided for the Israelites in their time of need in the wilderness, and now they are able to eat of the produce of the land, the old corn of the land of Canaan. Now they're able to find food on their own. That new provisions come through. God doesn't have to provide that manna from the sky anymore. He can give you can find the fruit of the earth. So when the people were able to provide for themselves from the land of Canaan, God stopped the manna. God stopped the raining bread from the sky, right? And they were able to find different food. But only when they were able to. That's the amazing part of God's grace again here. Of saying, you know what? You might think you're good, you're able to stand up on your own, but not until you're able to eat. Not until you're able to encamp. Not until you're safe. Not until you're secure. Not until you're provided for. Then I'll stop this stuff. But you're still going to be looked after. God is so good. So, the promised land also provided a new opportunity for faith in God. And not laziness. Because it can be really easy sometimes to just be like, hey God, I got really used to eating that manna. Let's just keep eating now. I see the corn. I see the vegetables. Some nice taters over there. But do I want to go and dig up some potatoes? No. I'm just going to eat the bread from heaven because God still provided. No. If God's provided you a different way to do things, take it. Take it. But the point is, God provides. That's the big key thing here. But he also provides a new opportunity to trust. A new opportunity to trust from the Israelites. So the truth here is that God always provides. He always provides, whether it's manna from the sky or food from the earth. But God changes the source sometimes. We've got to be able to see what he's doing. We've got to see where the provision's coming from and how God provides. Our trust is not obviously in the food, but in the Lord, right? The one who created all of these things for us. The Israelites camped in Gilgal, celebrated the Passover here, and it would become an integral encampment for Israel in their conquest of Canaan. And I keep saying this because it's really important that we remember that this place is just up the river. They cross over, they camp right there, they put up some stones. That was home base right there. 40 years to get to that point. And now they have nations, numbers ready to take over the whole place. And they would return to Gilgal after battle and see the stones, see where they landed after this big long walk in the wilderness, and remember all that God had done. Gilgal wasn't just a camp, it was a place of memorial, right? A place of obedience, but also a place of redemption for them as well. A place that said, you made it. Good job, well done. Okay, final section. Section 3, Joshua meets the Lord's commander, verses 13 to 15. Okay, and it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Verse 13, Joshua was looking upon Jericho. He was looking upon a place where he wanted to get to, right? That's the goal over here. We're going to take it. I want to take it. Where did he send the spies to? Jericho, right? He's ready. He's ready to go. He's got this army across. They're all geared up, ready to go. Everyone's circumcised. Everyone's got their focus on the Lord. Everyone's ready to go now. Jericho's in Joshua's sights. Jericho is located just north of the Dead Sea. And it was a major Canaanite city just west of the Jordan. Okay? It's a big one. It's a big city. Joshua looked at Jericho and saw a man standing opposite him with a sword drawn. At that point, I probably would have said, all right, what's going on here? Put the sword away, man. I'm not ready for a fight. Understandably, Joshua asked the question, are you with us or against us? Are you with us or are you with the adversaries? Are you with us or are you with the other guys? 2 times in the Old Testament is this phrase, with his sword drawn in his hand, mentioned. That's Numbers 22 to 23, and 1 Chronicles 21, verse 16. And the reason why this is important, because again, it's another moment in the Old Testament. In both of these instances, the sword bearer is the angel of Yahweh. The angel of Yahweh. In verse 14, we read that this person gives up his identity as the commander of Yahweh's army. I am the captain of the Lord of Hosts' army. I am the guy in charge of his army. Exodus 15:3 tells us, the Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. A man of war. And even in this time, Joshua still approaches this stranger. This is the thing that makes me kind of smile about Joshua. He's taken on this new leadership role. He's got them across the Jordan. He's there. He's doing as he's told. And then he just goes wandering up to a random stranger with a sword because he says, I'm with the Lord. You know, he could have been talking about any Lord, but he knew who he was following. Joshua knew who he had been following the whole time, whose voice was leading, who's the pillar of smoke, the signs, the wonders, the miracles, all of Joshua knew who he was following. So when this Lord came up out of nowhere, this guy with the sword, he knew who he was. It's amazing to think about that. Go for it.
Was that Jesus?
Oh, you're not going to say spoiler alert or anything? Come on, where's that? Just dropping bombs over here? That was my next point. I was waiting for some suspense and everything. I was like, it's going to build up to it and be like, Jesus!
It was a guess.
And then everyone would have been like, and now I'm not going to get the joy of that. Thanks, Raz. I can't edit it. It would be lying, okay? But but this is the thing. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Do you think he's the Lord of the host of the armies of God? Who is it?
You missed.
Wes, what do you think? Is this Jesus? Is the Lord the host of the captain of the Lord's armies? Is that Jesus?
Can an angel say that something is holy? Like, who decides what's holy?
Yeah.
Other than God.
Read verse 14 or 14. What does Joshua do?
Do you want me to read it out loud?
You can just read it in your head real quickly. There's an action that Joshua does that tells you it's not just an angel.
The Lord's army.
What does he do?
He takes his shoes off and worships.
He falls prostrate on the ground and he worships. You don't worship an angel. You don't. You don't worship the cross. You don't worship the Bible, right? These are all things that point to God. Go for it.
Wait, how did he know that was Jesus? Because Mary thought that angel, and then the angel said, "Don't worship me. Or was that somebody else?
I don't know. What do you think?
No. Yeah.
Either way, point's still true. Don't worship angels, all right? I mentioned that in a second as well. But this is a key part. This is a big deal. You don't worship angels. Angels can't declare what is holy and what is not because that's not their role. God declares that. God declares what is righteous and unrighteous. God cleans what needs to be cleaned. So this is an amazing moment where we see Jesus in the Old Testament. Stood right there, sword in hand. I'm like, this is epic. This is great. And Joshua just walks up to him like, hey, Jesus, are you with me or with those other guys? And he's like, oh, well, I'm not actually with any of you. I'm with God. Are you with God? Because that's the big question. I'm not on your team. Are you on mine? Because that's the way it's meant to be, right? We're not. Jesus isn't Team Jamie. Like a lot of people try and convince us of this. Of like, Jesus has got your back. I'm like, well, yeah, but he's not on your team. He's not a cheerleader cheering you on behind here. He's the guy out there fighting for you. Are you got his back? Are you on his team? Are you following him or is he following you? Because it's gotta get that right, you know? So Joshua has been trusted to lead and to protect his flock. This flock, this nation of Israel, he's been put in charge. But he's going to the guy who's truly in charge now. He's going to Jesus and he's saying, I'm ready to go because you're here. I'm ready to go because I'm following you. I'm thankful that I get to follow you here. And this man, people turn around and say, like, this man is the angel Michael. They look at Revelation 12:7, and they say, this is Michael. This is who he is right here. But, and this is my point, Joshua falling down and worshipping is inconsistent with angels who should not receive worship. Revelation 22:8-9 tells us that. Do not worship angels. Worship God. Joshua would know this, so he doesn't do it. Okay? The army of the Lords, that's a pretty awesome army to be in charge of, right? Being in command of all these angelic armies. Joshua also calls this person my Lord, with the command that follows to remove his sandals, which is our contact point with this dirty world, right? The things on our feet that's touching sinful ground, take them off. You're on holy ground now. Angels can't declare holy ground. Angels can't say that. The voice in the burning bush, what did it say? Take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. Remove your sandals. This place is holy. But what made it holy? It wasn't the bush. It wasn't the lamb caught in as a substitute. It wasn't any of the scenario but God. That's what's happening here. Take off your shoes because the land here is now holy because I am here. Because Jesus is there. That's what makes it holy. It's pretty amazing. I love finding points like this of Jesus in the Old Testament because it's just like... he was there. You read it in Genesis, and he's there with the Father and the Spirit, and it's right in the creation story. And then you're like, and then in Joshua here, and you go, ah, he's all the way through it. But you just got to find him. It's like, where's Waldo but for the Bible and Jesus? It's fantastic. So this was proof. As soon as this command comes out of remove your sandals, this must have been proof to Joshua that this man standing before him was actually the voice from the burning bush. It was Jesus. It was the Son of God right there. And Exodus 3:4-6 is the account of the burning bush if you want to read about that. But here's a couple of extra moments I wanted to tell you. Micah 5:2, Genesis 18:16-33, a big chunk right there. And Judges 13:1-23 reminds us that Jesus existed before Bethlehem. Before he was birthed, Jesus was around. Right? And that he can appear in bodily form. So add Joshua 5 to that as well. You got 4 extra verses right there that point you to Jesus being around in bodily form before he was birthed onto this earth. Amazing. And Joshua sees that this isn't just an angel and fell prostrate. What does that mean? Whack down on the floor. You plank right there. Go for it.
This is random, but have you seen the VeggieTales one?
Of this moment?
Yeah, he does the same thing.
Yeah. It's great. It's fantastic. Yeah, VeggieTales does a good job.
They've changed. No.
They have changed, and it's a sad time.
Mhm.
It really is.
This is twisted.
Who knew that a tomato could go so bad, you know? So, Joshua, he's fallen prostrate on the floor as he hears the voice of God. The command was told to see that the ground he is standing on as holy ground. Remove your shoes. Don't bring sin over here. Leave that dirt at the door and come to me. I think that's fantastic. So Joshua did it. Total submission. shows who's really in charge. Who is really in charge here? It's not Joshua. It wasn't Moses before that. It wasn't any of the other leaders or generals or anyone else like that. It was God. God's been in charge the whole time. But it also shows victory. Victory. Who, when we follow God, who can defeat you? When you follow God with your whole heart, if you believe in Him 100%, if you believe that He is Savior, that He died on the cross, rose 3 days later, that you are saved, washed clean by the blood of the Lamb, we can go through Romans Road and make sure that you are. If you are following God and you lose, what does that mean? It's victory. It's heaven. It's that. That's not a loss. People might think that's a loss because your body's then gone, but you know what? You're partying with Jesus up in heaven. That's not a loss. That is total victory. So, when we follow after God, how can you lose? Honestly, how can you? You can't. So Jesus appeared to Joshua to give instruction about what they're going to be doing next, and Brother Scott's going to be going through chapter 6 next week for that. But the bigger plan than just taking over Jericho was conquering Israel. Conquering that nation. Making sure that nation was actually under submission of God. Making sure that they were ready to be led by God. Making sure that there was trust, faith, submission to Jesus in this time. True Christians are those who have been conquered by Jesus and are in total submission to His plan, not our own. That's a tough thing to think about. Because actually our plans are, they're great. They're good stuff. Want to be a millionaire. Want to be a YouTube superstar. Sensation. Want to go on America's Got Talent. Realize I'm on the wrong show because I'm not American. Right? But still make it big. Get a hit single. Sing, sing, sing. Become famous. That might not be God's plan for me. That might not be God's plan. And I've got to accept that He has a better plan. Because if I'm truly a Christian, if I'm truly a follower of God, then I need to trust, allow Jesus to take that first place. He is first, I am second. He is bigger, I am smaller. He is more, I am less, right? That's not just a saying that you see on the back of on the cars and bumper stickers and stuff like that. It's the truth. That's what needs to happen. And that's what Jesus was doing now as He came and He spoke to Joshua. He was finding out, are you truly believing in me, or are you just believing in yourself? Are you believing in me, or are you believing in what Moses and people before you told you what to believe? Are you submitted to me or not? That's it. That's Joshua 5. I've got 3 final thoughts for you here. And that is, first one, what does obedience to God look like to you? We live under new law, thankfully, so circumcision doesn't do it anymore, right? It just doesn't cut it anymore. Terrible joke, right? But how do you show obedience to God? How do you show obedience to God in this life? With all the temptations and all the bad stuff that's trying to pull you away, how do you show God that you're obedient to Him? Will you pray? Will you read your Bible? Will you put Him first in what you're doing? You welcome Him into your life with the understanding that He might have a different plan. These are all ways of showing obedience to God. Are you obedient to Him? Second one, God provides. Can you see the provision? Food, money, family, friends, rest, a house, a car, whatever it is, God provides. Can you see that provision? Do you accept the provision? We went for a time when we lived in England. Youth pastor salaries are really not a thing in England. It's kind of not really a job. It's kind of like a stepping stone to a different thing. And when they realized that I wanted to do this as long term as possible, because I enjoy doing this and it's something I felt God asked me to do, we struggled. We struggled for money. I didn't get pay increases. But you know what? God provided every single month. We'd get a knock on the door, and I'd run to the door and I'd open the door, and there, right in front of me, was a basket of food. Cans, rice, all these different things. And I look around and I'm like, I can't see who dropped this off. But God just provided again for my family. God just provided yet again for my bills to be paid, for food to be in my belly, for a roof over my family's heads. God provided. Could I see that provision? Did I accept that provision? Yes and yes, but do you? That's the big question here. Okay, third one here. Are you totally submitted to Christ? Total submission, putting off our ways to embrace God's ways. Putting off our plans to accept his plans. It's a really tough thing to ask. It's a really tough thing to understand. Because what you're basically saying is you're no longer in control. You're saying, Jesus, you're number one, Jamie's number two. Have you totally submitted to Christ in your life? There you go. That's Joshua 5.